What's up guys, it's Josh back with another video, and today I wanted to show you guys the best Linux server distros to use while setting up your home lab. So as I stated in the intro of the video, I wanted to show you guys some of the best Linux distributions out there to run as a server when setting up your home lab. I know it's a lot of people out there that are trying to get in to learn Linux because it's being used in the cloud, and they want to get a better understanding of how to actually use the Linux operating system. And I wanted to cover some of the best distributions you can use when setting up your lab. Now, all of these are server editions, and this list is based on my experience working with the Linux operating system for a very long time. And don't take my list to be the end all be all. Try out these different distributions and find out which one will work for your situation. But they all are excellent server editions of Linux operating systems out there that you can use. So let's go on and switch over to my browser so I can show you guys number one. And the first one on the list is Ubuntu Server. And I've been personally using Ubuntu since around 2007, which is when I was first introduced to Linux. And I can't remember what version of Ubuntu I was actually using. I think it was like 12 or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But I actually used Ubuntu Server as my first server that I set up at my house using a old computer that I probably bought off of Craigslist at the time. And for one, this distribution is very stable. It's an excellent distribution. It's also popular, and there's a vast community behind this distribution of Linux. And if you run into any issues, you can definitely check a lot of the forum boards that are out there that can help you solve a lot of the problems. Because we all know in IT, whenever you run into an issue, no matter what it is, it could be programming, it could be systems administration work, someone has faced the issue that you're actually trying to figure out, and most likely went on forum boards to look for the issue or even ask questions about this issue, and someone may have provided a solution for it, or at least a direction you can take to fix that issue. And that's one of the major reasons I suggest this distribution, because Ubuntu Server has been around and has a big community, like I said, so you can figure out issues fairly quickly when using this distribution. Also, the documentation is awesome. So if it's anything you're trying to install, you can easily install it using their documentation just by following the tutorials that they provide. So this is why Ubuntu is kind of like high on my list as far as a server that you want to set up in your lab. Now, to cover a few of the features of Ubuntu Server, you know, they do have a support life cycle of up to 10 years if you're using the LTS version of Ubuntu. And let me show you guys how to actually get that. If you click downloads right here, you'll find Ubuntu Server right there. You can click right there, but as long as you download the LTS version of the actual server, and we can click right here on option 2, that'll actually afford you to download the latest LTS, which is 20.04, and they're on like .3 right now. But this is the LTS release, the 20.04 LTS release. So you want to download that. And as you can see right here, it says OS security guaranteed until April 2025, and then the extended security maintenance until April 2030. So that's a good amount of time that this current release is supported. And for a long time, I was actually running Ubuntu 16.04, which I thought was excellent. And then I finally went on and upgraded to 20.04 a little while back. But on all my servers that I've managed in the past, I've went straight to Ubuntu starting out because it's the simplest, and I've ran into so many issues over the years that I've had to fix within Ubuntu. I kind of understand how to actually use the operating system in the most effective way to get whatever done that I'm trying to get done. And another feature with Ubuntu, it uses the app package manager by default, which is an excellent package manager. They have a lot of software in their repositories that you can download. It may be a little behind, but they do a lot of thorough testing on the software before it's actually updated and released within their repository. So you get to go. And so that's all I wanted to cover with Ubuntu. Check that out. It's an excellent distribution. I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. Now, the next distribution I wanted to show you guys is the father of Ubuntu, Debian. And Debian has been around for a very long time. And so a lot of the Debian and Ubuntu based distributions, they all come from the Debian operating system, which, like I said, has been around for a very long time. It's an excellent operating system, and I recommend people check this out as a server as well. Now, if you've used Ubuntu, then you understand that Debian uses the same package manager, which is apt. So if you have experience using Ubuntu, then you can easily pick up Debian because it's pretty much the same. Now, they have 3 different versions of Debian. There is a stable, a testing, and an unstable version that you can download and install. I recommend you guys check out the stable version. Okay, so let me go down and show you guys how to download Debian, but you can just basically hit the more. You can hit the download button that was up there, but if you hit more, this will give you a couple more options to actually download it. So if we click download here, this will take you and show you all the different options. So there's a small installation image, the complete installation image, and they have a cloud image. They also have a live ISO, so you could try out Debian live. And this page only has the Debian stable version, which is what you want. You want the stable version. You don't want to play around with the testing and unstable version of Debian. Otherwise, it won't work right for you, especially if you want to get this thing set up for production. Now, when you go through the installation, it will give you an option if you want to install a desktop environment. If you're setting up a server, all you have to do is select no desktop environment, and that'll get you a base server install with all the tools you need in order to run Debian as a server. So I hope you guys check this one out. Let's move on to the next. And the next one I want to show you guys is Rocky Linux. And this is an awesome new kid on the block that's been around for a little while. And I wanted to show you guys this because it's an alternative to CentOS. And CentOS is not on this list, but in my opinion, Rocky is the next best thing. And Rocky is a community powered distro with a downstream build, which is how CentOS was previously set up before they changed it. And some of the features is basically a downstream build, just like I said. It's stable, and it also has like a standard release cycle, similar to how CentOS was before. And it also has a pretty decent community behind it as well. And it's an awesome distribution, in my opinion. I've been running on one of my virtual machines, just testing it out, updating it, installing applications, playing around with it. And it's an awesome distribution that you can use to set up for a server in your home environment or in your cloud environment, as well as your business. Also, and one cool thing about Rocky, I have started seeing it being available in a lot of cloud providers. For instance, I was working on a video for my channel a while back, and I was using Linode, which is one of the cloud providers that I currently use. And I saw that Rocky Linux was available within the cloud provider, which I thought was super cool. So I went back later after I finished what I was working on at the time and went through and installed Rocky Linux and just tested it out in the cloud, which I thought was awesome. And just to quickly show you guys how to actually get Rocky, all you have to do is hit download, and that'll download 8.5, which is the latest version of Rocky Linux. And as you can see, right, what it says right here, Enterprise Linux, the community way, it says Rocky Linux is an open source enterprise operating system designed to be 100% bug for bug compatible with Red Hat Enterprise Linux. It is under intensive development by the community, which is super cool. So I think you guys should check out Rocky Linux as a viable alternative to CentOS, as well as all the other server Linux distributions out there. And they also have instructions on how to migrate. I just wanted to add that to you guys. Now on to the next one, and the next server I wanted to show you guys is Fedora. Now Fedora is awesome. I've heard great things about Fedora. I've used it, as a server and a workstation. I've set this up in the desktop environment, just played around with it, as well as manage things on a server. And then one thing you guys should know, all of these Linux distributions are pretty much the same. The only difference is the package manager and maybe the initialization software, but they all use the Linux kernel. A lot of them have pretty much the same software across the board that you can install. You can set up websites, you can set up, databases on these servers. They're all pretty much the same, and Fedora is no exception. You know what I'm saying? The current version of Fedora is 35. And just to explain a little bit about Fedora, it is a distro based on RHEL, which is Red Hat Enterprise Linux, with bleeding edge software and more frequent updates and releases. And I typically recommend this distribution to people that are looking to study up for the Red Hat Enterprise Linux exam, because it's pretty much a 1-for-1, similar to CentOS. And mainly what I'm talking about is the package manager with the Yum package manager, And just to cover some of the different versions, is, as you can see right here, you got your Fedora workstation. They also had a server, which is what I'm trying to show you guys. So this is something you can actually download right here. But one cool thing about it, they have a Fedora for IoT devices, which if you're trying to practice using an IoT device, they do have an ISO for you there as well. And a lot of people, when they set up IoT devices, they're setting it up, where it's command line only, headless, and you can connect to it via SSH. So it's basically running as a server. But as you can see right there, it says Fedora IoT provides a trusted open source platform as a strong foundation for IoT ecosystem. And it's super cool. Now with Fedora, you only have about 13 months of support for each release. And one thing about it, you'll get that bleeding edge updates. So you get updates faster using Fedora. And as I said, it's a super cool server. If you want to try it out, it's definitely worth looking into and setting up and having in your home lab. Now, the next distribution is another great alternative to CentOS, which is Alma Linux. Now, this one is super cool. It's kind of along the lines of Rocky Linux, which is what I talked about earlier. But it's, like I said, it's a great alternative to CentOS. It's a stable distribution, and it also has a long-term support cycle, which is something that you really want to look for, especially if you're planning on setting this thing up for a production environment. It's basically a clone of RHEL and has everything that the old CentOS had. And another thing about Alma Linux, you can migrate as well from CentOS to the latest version of Alma. I know a lot of people are looking for ways to migrate off of CentOS because of the changes they made, and this is another alternative for you. And like I said, this is stable and it has long-term support, periods like, for instance, Alma Linux OS 8, which is the current long-term support, is supported until 2029 based on documentation I read. So it's always good to look for one of those distributions that have a long support period, because a lot of times when new releases come out, there are bugs that have to be fixed, and it's best for you to stay on that long-term support until they fix a lot of the bugs on the newer versions or new releases, and then consider upgrading, because you can kind of break things, because if some software is not supported on the latest version, then you may run into issues. And that's something I've seen in the past, especially using Ubuntu. A lot of times if I wanted the latest version, I would just back up everything, back up configuration files, my home directory and all that stuff, and just do a clean install of Ubuntu with the latest LTS, and then install everything back onto the server. And I use that as a way to practice, or a way to keep my skills sharp, by doing a full reinstall and then setting everything back up using the latest version or the latest long-term release. Because it's easy to set up a Ubuntu server, especially if it has automatic updates on it, especially for security stuff, to just set it and forget it, and it'll keep running with no issues, you know what I'm saying? And it'll do all the automatic updates for you. You don't have to worry about it. And so, you know, when you don't use certain skills, you can kind of lose it. So it's best to go back and, I don't know, go through and understand your configuration files and remember what you actually did to set things up by going through the install again. But like I said, Alma is a great distribution as well, so check that one out as well. Now the last one is kind of weird for a server edition of a Linux distribution, and I'm throwing this in there just because I've used it as a server in the past as well. But Arch Linux is an excellent distribution to use as a server. Now there is a learning curve, especially when it comes to installing it, and you want to learn how to do it. They basically call it the Arch way of installing Arch, which is strictly command line based. And with Arch, it uses the Pacman package manager, which I think is like super great, and as well as their documentation is out of this world, and the community, you know what I'm saying, with a lot of the issues you may run into, a lot of people have run into it and have documented it or put it in the forum boards. It's just an excellent overall Linux distribution, in my opinion. Arch Linux is the way to go. Especially if you want to set up a desktop environment, you want to fully customize it, then Arch is kind of the way to go, in my opinion. It's super lightweight, you know, it's super flexible as far as a distribution go. And also, if you want to have like software that is new, you know what I'm saying, or fully updated, then you can, you know, run with an Arch Linux. Now you may run into problems, and I recommend this for like an intermediate person that has been using Linux, not a full beginner, because you can break the operating system and can't figure out how to fix it if you're a noob. You know what I'm saying? There is documentation out there, and I've seen new people actually get in and use Arch Linux right off from the beginning, because it's not that difficult. The documentation is there, you just have to read and figure it out. But Arch Linux is a rolling release, so if you miss updates or whatever, then you can break the system that way. So it's a lot of things. It's you got to keep up on it, you know, in order to keep Arch Linux running. But like I stated earlier in the video, all these Linux distributions can run pretty much the same software on it. So you can set up a web server, you know, all that stuff. And I did a video on setting up Arch Linux a while back. And to set up a server, all you have to do is stop at the point where I state how to install a desktop environment on it. And that's pretty much a server edition of Arch Linux. So the install is pretty much the same as if you're installing it the normal way. You just don't want to install a desktop environment on it, especially if you're running it headless. And what I mean by headless is no monitor hooked up to it, as well as no keyboard or mouse hooked up to it, and you strictly manage the server via SSH. So Arch Linux is an awesome distribution to check out and run as a server. You can install it on pretty much anything. So make sure you check out Arch Linux. It's my favorite distribution. It's what I use on my laptop currently. It's my daily driver, Arch Linux, with the XFCE desktop. But like I stated, if you want to set it up as a server, you surely can set it up as a server. Just don't install a desktop environment, because there's no need for it unless you just want to have a desktop environment on it. But you can run it as a server. And like I said, it's not recommended for beginners. And also, I want to reiterate, it is a rolling release distro, meaning that it's constantly getting updates. So you can update your system pretty much every day. You'll probably see updates to the Arch Linux operating system. And what I typically do is I go in and update once a week on my system. Even though the updates don't take too long, I just go in and do it, you know, once a week and then keep it going from there. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out all these Linux distributions that you can set up and run as a server. And these are excellent distributions you can use to set up your home lab and just play around with software so you can learn and understand Linux. You can use VirtualBox as well as Proxmox or any of these hypervisors out there to actually run these server editions just to play around with it. And you can also set it up in the cloud in most cases. Probably not all of these distributions, but pretty much the most of the ones that I stated in the beginning. I know for sure Ubuntu is in the cloud, Fedora I've seen in the cloud, Rocky Linux I've seen in the cloud, and a few others, Debian as well. So hopefully this helps you guys figure out a good Linux distribution and set up as a server so you can get that home lab up and running. So please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave comments down below. I love to talk to you guys. I love to have conversations about Linux. It's one of my favorite things to actually talk about because I think it's super cool, and that's pretty much my hobby. But I hope you guys have a good day, and of course, keep it techie.